Let's go now to Maui. What is your... By the way, this is one of the most on-brand points, but it's a good one this time. It's not indulgent this time. What is your good point, Maui?
Oh, right. I had to do this one.
Of course.
Of course, it's the fact that BiG decided to change their roster up after not qualifying for even the RMR. And what they did is they...
Well, obviously, Maui, low-key, they don't watch our shows, obviously, because we did just almost like a week before this, like, wasn't it on Health Take Point Medicine? Did we literally reference this exact topic? Like, the BiG's like a waste of time or whatever. They must be fans of the show. Fucking hell.
Yeah. Well, it's. I think the point then was something like along the lines of like Crimbo and Tabson were in big jail or something. Well, I think BiG are making the moves now to make it seem like they're not just trying to keep their star players in jail. They're actually bringing back syrsoN. They're bringing JDC, who was obviously one of the founding members that had Maus on their rising trajectory when they had to like reshuffle their players and everything like that. And so they're replacing Montu and syrsoN. And I want to say first and foremost that JDC is a flat out upgrade for syrsoN. They play a lot of similar positions, and JDC, for all intents and purposes, just makes so many fewer errors than syrsoN. That's the main thing for me. syrsoN, there was every now and then you'd get these weird kind of pop-off times from syrsoN, but all in all, watching the qualifier games from syrsoN, watching the Blast games from syrsoN, just kind of watching this guy for the last handful of months with BiG, you just see these head-scratching moments so frequently that really make me wonder, like, why did he leave his teammate? Why didn't he try to trade? Why is it like there were these things where it's just like the fundamentals just weren't, unfortunately, they just weren't there for this guy, and I think that he has probably room to grow, but JDC is a proven quantity. He's not going to necessarily change the whole dynamic of your team from a firepower standpoint, but he's a guy that was supposedly like a secondary caller when he was playing with Shuhei and when Maus were overperforming based off of the firepower they had back then. In terms of his stats, actually, once he started playing with syrsoN Nation, it seems like he started being a little bit more selfish, stopped thinking entirely about the team, and it's actually helped him out a lot in terms of his own confidence. And then also, you think about syrsoN and you think about versus Montu, and in recent memory, actually, Montu's been pretty good. I actually think that Montu, in a weird way, it's almost in a weird way a shame that this isn't just a one-for-one syrsoN for JDC, but they decided to go for the whole all-in, back-to-speaking German way by bringing back in syrsoN. And yeah, syrsoN hasn't actually performed incredibly well under syrsoN Nation, but we do know that this guy was such an RMR farmer and like he was basically like a low-stakes merchant. This guy would always raise the floor of BiG, because if you're not throwing great flashes, he's just decimating you. He'll be aggressive, he'll get in your face, he'll go for his own plays, and he was a guy that could just take over those kinds of games. Obviously, against, top tier opposition in the world, sometimes he could falter, especially if it was on a stage or just late in a tournament, but like that was usually something we had to be concerned about once you started reaching top 10 at an S tier event or top 8 at an S tier event. It wasn't at a point where you're not even making it to the RMR. Like he was the reason that him and Crimbo, I remember, for one of the RMRs was the reason they beat FaZe. Like they just ran, them two just like ran as a duo everywhere and just destroyed FaZe. And so like, it's cool to see him back. If you're talking about like potential or whatever, like is Montu getting better? Is syrsoN getting better? Well, syrsoN's only 1 year older than Montu. So it's not actually like you're substituting some like huge like up and coming rising talent Montu. It's like, no, he's been in this tier 1 scene as an opper for a while now. And so has syrsoN for that matter. And so if syrsoN can just kind of like raise himself back to the level that we know that he was able to reach on BiG, well, I'm incredibly excited because of course this brings BiG back to a domestic and German identity, so that they're going to be able to speak in German again, as opposed to sacrificing their native language because Montu was on the team. And yeah, of course, again, Montu was good, but like you're obviously losing a little bit in terms of communication and on-the-fly calling, which is now not going to be a problem because JDC is German, syrsoN's German. Everyone now can speak in their native tongue, and you can just imagine that the communication is going to flow a lot more seamlessly.
Come on, Ted, jump in. Basically, after anyone who talks, you give your thoughts if you want. Go on.
All right. Well, first of all, I think it's a really good point, the language barrier there. I think it's always been a really awkward one for me why syrsoN left. I mean, initially when I saw the announcement, the first thing that came to mind was eternal issues, because I feel like he's without a doubt the best German opera maybe ever to play. And when you have him on offer, and if you don't hate each other in the guts with Tabson, it just makes sense for him to be a part of the team, right? Like Maui said, I don't think... I like Mantu. I think he was one of their best players in the last couple months. But I don't think the difference between syrsoN and Mantu's skill is that big to justify speaking in English. And yeah, in that manner, I feel like syrsoN is a good one. JDC for syrsoN, again, I might have a little bit of bias towards syrsoN actually, because I really like him. I think he's got a really good mindset as a young player. I feel like JDC's got one benching in advance for of syrsoN. I feel like him getting removed by Mouse has actually helped him out to learn a lot of things that syrsoN is yet to learn, because he's a lot younger as well. And I feel like JDC going into the lineup might have a little bit less pressure than syrsoN had, because obviously you're getting promoted from the academy, but you got promoted. We all remember the chaos with BiG, essentially. So you get promoted, you go back to the academy, you play with the main team again, you go back to the academy, you do that 10,000 times. So I feel like maybe subconsciously you could be a little bit afraid even that might happen again when you're going into the main team. And you feel like you're that prodigy of the organization, you need to do really well. But yeah, JDC, the last couple months on syrsoN Nation, I really liked him as well. I feel like, as Maui said, he just started playing for himself a little bit more, understanding that on syrsoN Nation, he kind of had to do that because he was a lot more skilled than some of the teams that he was playing against. One issue that I actually have, which I'm not going to say it's an issue with the transfer itself, because I overall think that this is a good move for BiG. One issue that I have, I'm not necessarily sure if the problem with BiG, at least the problem that I'm seeing in BiG, is actually around pieces that are not involving the structure and the approach for the game. What I mean by that, I feel like BiG is maybe the team that plays like the biggest by the book CS out there. They just make the most perfect decisions most of the time, if it's not just individual errors. Like on a team level, they react really strictly to some things, but I feel like sometimes that just makes it really easy for other teams to read, and I feel like sometimes it might feel a little bit stale and even a little bit boring to watch, because it's just like they make the perfect decision. So I think throwing in a couple maybe wild pieces, maybe if JDC and syrsoN, I actually think that's why syrsoN has such a good dynamic with this team, because he is a little bit wild every now and then, right? He can play that up in the face style of CS. I feel like that's actually good, because he's one of the few players that's going to feel comfortable actually maybe in a way neglecting the structure at sometimes and just going for a play that he feels like. So I think having a couple wilder players that have more confidence to go for plays like that is good for BiG's playstyle, and I think he could switch it up in a nice way.
Yeah, actually, this is something where I will probably do like my own video about this roster move. I actually think it's one that deserves it, because I actually think this is one where I'll obviously tease the opinion here, but I'll go way more in depth there. I actually think I could talk a lot again and tie about like abstract ideas about roster composition, because if people remember, it was actually me who made the video. I think I made it way back in like 2015 or something ridiculous. I made a video a long time ago where I explained how I model CS, and spoiler, almost every one of your favorite pros uses this model now. They just don't know I invented it in the same way a fish doesn't know water exists. So when they all use that thing of like, he's the second start, and then they turn around to me and go, yeah, Maran, there's no roles and things like, why are you using my terminology then? But okay. So basically, if you look at my classic model of how you make a CS team, they've nailed it. This is literally paint by numbers. They have nailed every role. Think about this. So we have got the in-game leader, Tabson. We already know he's good at that. He's done it for years now. It's not like he's still the protege of God B. He's really good at that. He's actually just a top IGL in his own rights. You notice when we talk about him going to other teams, I used to want him to go to FaZe as a rifler. I could go as the IGL now if he wants. If it was the Nico team, he could have just gone as IGL too. Like, I actually think if anything, he's just a good IGL that frags way more than he should. Like, his game now is comparable to like a Magisk or something. Like, he's just going to give you all this extra impact, whether it's purely on the scoreboard or not. So if you think about the framing, I've essentially got my IGL, and I would say my third star in one player. I've got a very unique position here. Then on the outskirts of the team, I've got my obvious support players, JDC. It's basically what he's done. And what everyone says in Mouse is he's the guy who'll just fill any role. So perfect. He could be sort of the defensive, passive, supportive element. Process is obviously the entry fragger. We've got that one nailed immediately, and there's no pressure on him in this lineup at all, by the way. You can literally be the worst player as long as you literally just run in, tell us where they are, shoot them a bit, and make space for the next guy coming in, which would probably be Crimbo or in this case, depends on how syrsoN plays. That's it. You've done your job. And then the last two players are Crimbo and syrsoN. So I've got a star rifler and a star AWP. Mate, this team's got it all. I can't believe it, but I was always of the opinion that actually staying German would be the thing that gate kept them. It would mean basically you could never get enough sort of firepower in. Dude, if here's the good news. Either this lineup will be really good or you can't make a top German team, because this is like the German super team. Oh, and then by the way, remember, a lot of people forget this. In BiG, they had to cycle through all those coaches. They had the Toby guy, they had Legia, and that's because God B was off doing Valorant. God B is the coach. I know a lot of people didn't notice that because it was kind of the quiet period of BiG BiG, it was only even the Blasts that were ever making noise. They even actually have the Dream Team coach as well. Like, this is actually the best squad you could almost make. And I'll actually tie it to what Ted said at the end there. If you ever listen to my reflections with syrsoN, because he is more of like an FPL style wild AWPer, and he just loves that like streaky style of play, that was not the God B style of the game, by the way. He actually talked about how there is sort of like some friction there, and God B doesn't like if you break his strat or you miss a flasher. But I actually agree with you. It's like what I said earlier about that other point in about Zonic and Glaive, if you remember, Ted. I actually think creative tension can be good. I actually think sometimes, like you're saying, if God B does it too much by the book, then that also becomes something you can read once you figure out what the book is. Meanwhile, if you only have the streaky AWPer who goes everywhere, you've got no structure, you can't base anything around that. So I think when you marry the two, and they've done it in the past, I actually do think this could be really good. So actually, it's not just in general that these additions are good. I actually think this is a banger roster. Like, I think low-key, the obvious joke I'll make to end is why did you wait to Phil to make the RMR to do it? Because as Maui just said, brother, if there's anyone who isn't called like Simple and Ziwu, like the most guaranteed player to qualify you to a major is syrsoN, because one, he made his whole name as an onliner, and then two, when there's no stage pressure and he's at the RMR, he just farms. The reason he was always sick at Blast is it's just a studio, isn't it? Like, if he's just in a tournament area, that guy, by the way, was really, really good. I always said his problem was, a bit like Hades, actually, he hadn't made the jump up to the big stage games. And by the way, I don't blame them. They are playing the hardest role, in my opinion, to make the jump up to the stage game. Tier 1 fucking AWPer. Like, that's the one where when you miss, you don't go, oh, I did 99 damage in 3. No, you missed. You did 0 damage. That's how you look shit in Counter-Strike, by the way. Try going on stage with no experience and playing against fucking Ziwu and Simple, and then you get smashed and everyone goes, replace him immediately. They don't even give you a chance. Like that thing I said about Process, he could have a shit game for 50 games as long as his team wins. The AWPer will always be the one. It's like goalkeeper in football. You're to blame every time you lose, mate. You have to be perfect, basically. So yeah, I actually think it's a banger roster. Like, I'm not normally that big on the big rosters themselves, but I think they're sort of like, if you know the players, and especially if you know like some of the stuff I said behind the scenes, I think they've quietly put together a fantastic one. This is almost like what my guide would say as to how you could build a book with, in this case, with a budget, seemingly. You're talking like you had to break the bank to get these players. I think this is a banger. I think it's all around. It's just a fabulous move. 10 points. There you go.
I was thinking if there was any way you could actually make a better German roster.
I mean, is there? Who would you even put on it though? Who is there?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you'd probably, like, the weakest position right now for this is Proces, but like you said, he's just playing the entry roles and everything. So the only other players that I think you would maybe consider is like Keto potentially, or
if you want to bring him back, yeah,
or Favin, I guess. But like, I think Keto maybe makes a little more sense, but like it's like I'm kind of splitting hairs at that point. So I think that this is, practically speaking, the best 5-man lineup you could put together out of Germany right now,
yes.
which is fantastic.
No, I just think it's a banger. Like I said, it's one of those rare times where I don't think they've got any disagreement. I think they killed it here. Actually, by the way, being as I do like tactical CS, I'm going to be a fan of this team, I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm actually looking forward to watching this team play. Even if, by the way, they don't have to win the tournament, if they could just be a playoff team, I think they could be like a tactical German version of what Virtus Pro is, with a bit less firepower. Like, basically, their style is what will define if certain teams can get through the bracket. Like, maybe I'll pick a random team. Maybe like a G2, maybe they run badly, because they classically used to often lose this team. Maybe they run badly into a team like this if they play freeform CS, who knows? See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.